In the learning path about data design and architectural concepts, we'll discuss on topic 3, that is the data lifecycle and understanding different phases of data. Before proceeding, if you are in a learning path about data and haven't yet subscribed for this channel, please do like and subscribe and press bell button for instant notifications. So let's see what is data lifecycle and what are the different phases of data lifecycle. Typically, as you can see, there are six basic phases or steps of data lifecycle. To start with creation of data, and then how do you store the data, how do you share the data with multiple users, and archiving the data, and finally delete or destroy the data. So let's see one by one phases in detail. So when we're talking about creation of data, so the data can be created from multiple different sources. So ideally the data will be created by any kind of a machine or IoT device or a sensor device or any kind of application or server logs. We need to understand that the creation of data will happen automatically by some machines or it will be triggered by humans. So if they are doing some transactions or if they are doing some kind of operations, the data will be generated by humans, and so there is some data which is generated by machineries as well. And there is a data encryption while import. So whenever we're talking about creation of data, the one more important step is, so we should make sure that the data is encrypted when we are ingesting the data. So whenever we are getting the data from the source to the target system for transformation or storage purpose, so during that ingestion process, we should make sure the data is transferred in the encrypted manner. So this is about creation, and when we talk about data storage, there are different concepts. So one is how do you basically how do you store the data? So data will be physically stored in on premise. When we say on premise, it is a company or an organization owned server or infrastructure. So that is inside the organization premises. So that's why we call it as a on premise. And cloud storage is nothing but the data will be stored in a third party cloud storage, so where we are paying vendor for the storage what we use. And the storage can be in the form of databases. We can store applications in the data of applications, and we can also store the data in file systems like Windows file machines and Linux files systems and Hadoop file systems, etc. And when we're talking about high availability, so when we are storing the data, we should really take care of how the data is available. And there are different concepts when we are talking about high availability. That means we usually replicate the data. That means we call it as a disk mirroring. That means one other copy of the data will be stored in some other machine or some other parallel storage device. So that we call it as a disk mirroring, and that also we call it as a RAID 1, RAID 1. And there is a RAID 5 also, which is talks about disk stripping with distributed parity. That means the data is distributed across three or more disks as a distributed manner. And also we need to define how the replication happens. So the replication happens on a real time or it happens on a particular frequency, so that also need to be taken care. And also the encryption, as we were talking about encryption in the transit. That means when we are bringing the data from the source system, we also need to take care of about the encryption when the data is stored. So that we call it as a data on rest encryption. And so there are different algorithms like AES, and there are certain regulatory and compliance related regulations by different organizations and by different countries. So to know more about that, please check the link in the description. And also regarding the classification, so the data has to be well classified. That means the data has to be logically classified. You cannot just go and dump the data in a raw format. So it has to be organized in a certain way. That means it might be organized in a country specific, the data can be divided into country specific or a region specific, or might be like year or date or month specific, so that the data can be easily accessed and data can be easily read. So classification is nothing but how do you organize the data in a meaningful way. And when it comes to the usage, so usage is nothing but after the data is generated and stored, so it can be used by different applications, and these applications can make the data convert into information. So data will be converted to information using some data processing or the data transformation. So this again happens using some different tools, different programming languages, so the data can be processed or transformed. And the next thing is again data security also will come into picture when the data is being used. So that means whenever you are telling, so the data will be shared across multiple people. So there is something called as POLP, that means least privilege as possible. That means we are defining the policies, that means a role based access control, what we call RBAC, RBAC. So this has to be, so this ensures there is specific access given to specific people, and this access is very least. That means, so everybody is not given access for everything. So certain people are given read access, certain people are given read write access. So that has to be what we're calling it as least privilege as possible. So it should be very least as possible. So that is how we define it. So that is also one of the policy. And when you talk about auditing, so there should be a routine auditing and survey, so that to make sure that the data is which is being accessed by multiple people is in a secure format, and only people who should have or who is intended to access, so only those people are using, or many other people are using. And the next is reports. The data can be used in terms of different reports, like say it might be files, it might be in the form of dashboards, or it might be a different presentation, or else it can be explained in the format of a story to the end user. And in all these cases, again the access, whoever the intended user are there, only for that users, so this data should be distributed. So that has to be taken care. Again, when we talk about data sharing, it is very similar to what we discussed previously, the role based access control. Whether like the data has to be shared internal to the internal organization user or external organization user. And there are different role based access control can be defined for different kind of users or category of users. And there is also privacy and privacy law and regulations, like as we mentioned in the previous slide, it is same, like least privilege as possible. And there are certain things like data leak prevention, DLP, and data security kind of thing. So there is like a PII, personal identification information, or personal health information. So this kind of data has to be properly classified and classified before being shared to the users. And data custodians are nothing but the people who give access to multiple users. So this data custodian should be well defined. So this should be usually product owners, so who own the products, who own the particular products. So if the data custodian is handed over to a wrong person, it might lead to a disaster. He might accidentally or intentionally give access to the wrong users. So the next thing is archival. So archival of data is nothing but whenever the data is not being used, or it is not frequently used, so the data into a backup mode, that we also call it as a cold storage. That means we can move the data by compressing it and to be stored, or else we can move the data into a different kind of storage, like a cheap storage solutions, like a cold storage solutions. So by doing this, we will the intention is to save the cost and also save the storage. And by saving the storage, we also save the computation power, because more the data, so more the computation power we need to process the data. So that's the reason usually organization will keep last 2 years of data or 3 years of data for any kind of analysis, and the older data will be going in a archival mode or a cold storage mode. And so data retention is again the same thing, how much period that data you want to retain in the live system, and how much data you want to how much older data you want to push it back to the cold storage. And again, encryption will come into picture whenever you are archiving also. Whenever you are archiving, so again we need to take care about the encryption. And so data destruction is also a very important concept in terms of saving the cost, and also in terms of security. So the data which is not been usually used, so has to be destroyed or deleted. So for doing the destruction, or for the deletion also, data deletion also, we have a lot of regulatory compliances by different organizations, and there are different policies, and we have to follow those process whenever we are deleting a data. And again, retention will come into picture. That means how much data you want in your system and how much data you want to delete, maybe 2 years or old years data you want to delete. So that is usually happen in a scheduled way. So we can schedule a job which on a daily basis, which usually checks the data which is older than 2 years and start deleting that data on a everyday basis. So something called as physical stress shredding is also there. So this will happen when the data is really important, uh, and it is not intended to be shared to any user by even accidentally. So that's in that case we physically destroy the data. That means we might burn the hardware that is been storing that particular data, or crush the storage device itself. And data wiping tools are also available. So whenever the data is stored in a physical device, we can use some kind of tools and techniques basically to wipe the data in a secured manner, so that it cannot be retrieved in any other manner by anyone. So hope you understood the different phases of data lifecycle. Thanks for watching.